Welcome to Between the Covers, the show for readers and writers and lovers of books. I'm Stephanie, and I'm a publisher at Red Penguin Books, where we publish books of all types and genres. So if you have a book in your head, something already saved on your hard drive, or maybe even 300 sheets of loose leaf shoved in a drawer, and yes, at least once a month, I get a huge envelope mailed to me with hundreds of sheets of loose leaf to type. Please visit us at redpenguinbooks.com and unleash your inner author. I'm so excited to be joined by some talented authors who have completely unleashed themselves, that's for sure. Our first author, Stephen Heiman, is the author of Greetings, Planet Earth. And the author writes, Book 1 of the Jack Gripper series. Aliens are here and they want our chocolate. It is up to Jack to save the planet and stop a galactic war. Jack Gripper loves playing pranks and eating pizza. But when he's tasked with selecting an alien species to mentor Earth for the next 100 years, he'd better make the right call or the Earth is doomed. Can he overcome obstacles and diabolical plots to pick the right alien? And just as important, can chocolate and pizza survive an alien encounter? Please welcome author Steve Heiman. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
My goodness gracious, I can't be reading book descriptions like that before dinner because I'm starving.
There's a fair amount of food involved in the book, for sure.
It sounds like it. And this is book 1. Does that mean that book 2 is going to be like mozzarella and calamari, and book 3 is going to be, bagels and lox? Where are we going with
No, I found something else to focus on besides food. I can't be food-centric entirely. I mean, books have to evolve and grow. And no, book 1 takes place on planet Earth. Book 2, some of it does, but some of it doesn't. And that's definitely not the focus. But yeah, book 2 is called Help, I Lost My Planet.
That's a pretty scary thing to lose one's planet, isn't it?
It is. I actually could have titled it Help, I Lost My Galaxy, but I thought that was a little too big, but it actually is quite a large scope that the book encompasses, for sure.
Is it sort of like Help, I've Lost My Pizza, or no?
Help, I lost my pizza. I'm not familiar. Well, I never lose pizza. That's too important. That's like losing gold.
I agree. And chocolate. I don't lose chocolate.
Yeah. So they're two of Earth's commodities. And so
where did this idea come from? Were you hungry like me one night? Were you shopping? Were you craving food? How does an idea like this come to your head?
Ideas like that aren't something that you just kind of plop into your head, really. And that's kind of the way the book happened. I was honestly writing my first book ever. It was the start of COVID. And like a lot of other people, I was probably a little depressed. And so I was out on my daily walk trying to figure out how to navigate this really dark dystopian novel that I was beginning as a first-time author, where, the lead character's scientist friend, they just made a discovery, he was killed, and it's like, oh my gosh, what have I started, right? I'm out on my daily walk, and I was like, why am I writing this such a depressing book, right? I stopped, and so I was just like, the whole idea plopped in my head, very much the same way that some of the ideas in the book happen. I don't necessarily I don't map out what happens between point A and point B in my book. That's up to the characters and the situation and the randomness in my brain. I grew up on Marx Brothers, Monty Python, Firesign Theater, those types of just spoofy, zany, like what kind of non sequitur type of humor. So
I guess my real question should be, what on earth inspired that dystopian novel that you were working on? Because knowing you now and hearing this makes sense. The dystopian novel.
You're right. It doesn't. I'm a huge fan of science fiction as well as fantasy and humor and classics and everything else. And I don't know. I think my brain was a bit dark and my spirit was a bit dark at the time. And that's just what came out. I didn't map it out. I didn't know. I was a very much a newbie author as a novelist. I had done a lot of creative writing, a lot of content writing, a lot of journalistic writing previously, and had always wanted to write a book, but hadn't, tackled it. And COVID gave me the opportunity. And then, yeah, so that was the first attempt. And that was about 3 chapters in, like 8,000 words, I think. And just was like, I don't know if I want to do this. Man. And that's when I started to question if that was really the right book.
Exactly.
And this whole story was just literally gifted to me in a momentary flash.
Did you ever finish that dystopian novel, or did you use it for firewood?
It's funny that you should bring it up. I hadn't considered it in a year and a half.
Really?
And I was thinking about it right before this interview. And I was like, wonder if I'll ever get back to that. And I don't know that I will. And I was thinking if I did, I probably will tweak it a little bit. And not to say that dystopian novels don't have their place. I mean,
right.
But that wasn't what I wanted to create at the time. I was hoping to make myself happier by doing something creative and also share that more inspirational, aspirational vision. And I won't say it's utopian necessarily, but it certainly paints a more positive picture about where we could go than in the midst of a global crisis.
Right.
We were facing, existentially at the time. And I don't think we've escaped those questions. They've been a bit removed now. We're kind of like a little bit laissez-faire about COVID and the global situation, less so than we were when the focus was on from that. So that's where my mind is at.
Well, as somebody who 20 minutes ago got a positive COVID test result, I can tell you that we're not as out of the woods as we thought we were.
No, we're not.
You win. Wayne wins for wow. That's the best opening line I've had a guest come out with in a long time.
I hope it goes well for you.
Good. He
looks good so far.
You look like you're
never underestimate the power of denial. It is so underrated as a defense mechanism.
I know denial and ice cream. I think that those two huge.
Pizza and chocolate.
Well, I was going to say the aliens are coming for the pizza and chocolate, so you got to keep your denial foods close.
So, I will say they didn't know about the pizza. The chocolate had a reputation for sure. The pizza was a bit of a discovery during the book and kind of a secret weapon from the protagonist. But
well, Wayne, it's very funny. I was just talking to us before we started about how back before COVID, we would all be sitting on a couch right now with a glass of wine. I'm like, yeah, glad we're on Zoom.
Yep.
Yeah, but you're looking good. You're looking very.
You are.
Is this your first go around with it? Because
Yeah, it is. I had dodged it for 2.5 years and I was actually feeling very smug and self-satisfied, which is why the universe decided to
absolutely
to slap me upside the head. But I'm fine. In the great cosmic scheme of things, I'm fine.
Right. I have one son who has somehow managed to dodge it no matter what. He's literally roomed with people coughing on him. And Yeah?
Yeah, I've somehow escaped it entirely. I was just actually in LA and I left and 3 of my relatives had it. I came home, tested, and nothing.
My bride has actually escaped it. Her test came back negative. So
wow. I escaped. I had ended up, my husband had it and I ended up with positive test results, but nothing. I just had the positive test results. So evidently,
And I'm sure your listeners are riveted by my personal nightmare.
I think it's part of it's the tip of the iceberg of the cascading series of crises that our planet is going to continue to face. I mean, that's just the reality, in my opinion.
And that's why Steve writes about the aliens and taking over and all that other stuff, because it's just going to keep cascading into infinity, isn't it?
There's a certain logic that says they can have it.
I mean, that's very true. I mean, I'm sure that they're right there on the edge of looking down saying, yeah, I don't think we want it right now.
Aliens getting COVID.
I think they're just like, yeah, you know what? We'll wait, kind of like that whole survival of the fittest, and see how this whole thing plays out, and then we'll go in. That's what they're thinking. But Wayne, we're glad you joined us from sunny Las Vegas. While we're talking about COVID, Steve mentioned that this was, the first time you were writing novels, Steve, was during COVID. Like, here I am.
Yeah.
You mentioned you're in Portland, Oregon, and I'm sorry, that's kind of dreary even on a good day, isn't it?
Oh, a bit. I mean, we get a fair amount of sunshine. We don't get rain all the time.
Okay, only 364 days a year you get rain?
No, it's not that bad.
Oh, okay.
And actually, the climate has been changing significantly. We've been getting more sunshine, less rain.
Okay.
Again, part
As
of the
opposed to
change in the
Wayne,
world.
Wayne has not seen a raindrop in 7 years.
Decade, right?
It's been a minute.
Yeah, it's
Well,
definitely been a minute, that's for sure.
I seem to remember a pretty heavy flooding rain not that long ago in Las Vegas, actually.
Well, that's true, because it really shocked people. It's like when it snows. Now, I'm in New York. It could snow, a foot and nobody even notices. It snows a quarter of an inch down in Atlanta, Georgia, and they have to close the whole city for an emergency because they don't know what
It's all about perspective, isn't it?
It is. And that's why if it rains in Vegas, they all melt, because it never happens. They're just so not used to it. So pandemic hit, and Steve, you were sitting there saying, oh, what should I do? I should write a dystopian novel and just like bury myself even deeper. And then finally, this little spark of nah, let's pull you out of this came about.
And I feel very blessed and honored that it did. It became a joy to write the book, and it kind of tumbled out.
Now,
So-
when did you know it was going to be? I mean, you're flat out calling it book one, which means I don't know if have you written book two yet?
Yeah, book 2 is on the shelves. Book 3 is underway.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So about halfway through or so, as the character started to develop, the protagonist starts off in a very juvenile, self-centered, like, you're not that crazy about him, but he ends up revealing himself as a very deep, thoughtful, caring person, and his universe expands obviously tremendously, and he's exposed to all these elements and forces, and it forced me to think deeper about where the book was going to go and what it really meant. And it's, on the surface, the book is extremely silly and goofy, but as it reflects my personality, my upbringing, and influence, I was also very deeply influenced by a lot of spiritual works in my younger days, and things like Seven Feathers with Native American information, and Ram Dass with that kind of mystical stuff, and then things like Siddhartha and Jonathan Livingston Seagull. Those were very influential as I grew up, and there's always been a part of me that, like, we need to connect with the full part of our being, and Jack had that same experience.
Right.
And so the character evolved and the themes evolved as well, and I realized there's no way I'm going to tackle this in one book, and I don't want to, because I want to continue writing. I was having fun. Well, it made sense to ride the coattails of book 1, to continue, instead of having to start from scratch. What's my next idea? So
Exactly.
The world building aspect, or universe building aspect, if you will, is one of the funner parts of it, to imagine what these things could be like. And I think it's also one of the reasons that we should be writing speculative fiction of all kinds, is to imagine what the human condition would be like in these different circumstances, so that we can, kind of inoculate ourselves to them,
Right.
and thereby grow. That's the purpose of art of all kinds.
Absolutely, absolutely. Not to mention when you're talking about multiple books and world building, every single book marketer in the world will tell you if one is good, two is better, and three is best, write a trilogy. Because who
Yes, I'm working
loves
with
trilogy?
someone and he's like, get that third book done as soon as you can, because a box set is where you want to be.
Absolutely.
People they like continuity, they like to know the full story, they get engaged with the characters in a way. And I like that too. I love long books. My books aren't that long, so I have to write a series.
You have to write
So
lots of
I have
them.
a
That's okay.
yeah. I have another series or another novel that I've started as well that is more in the fantasy realm because, like I said, my influences are diverse. I don't want to be stuck in just the comic genre. But so
No,
we'll see when that. I'm hopeful to have that done in 2023 as well. We'll see, what life allows me to do. So,
exactly.
not a full-time author, unfortunately, yet.
Not yet, but
Not
maybe
yet.
next time you come on the show, you will be.
I believe that to be true.
That's the hope. That sounds good to me, and we'll definitely have you on when the next ones are released. Our next author, straight from Vegas and COVID, Wayne Turmel is the author of Johnny Lycan and the Vegas Berserker. And our author writes, America's favorite werewolf private investigator is off to Las Vegas. What could go wrong? Life is good for Johnny Lupul. He has a steady gig and a growing reputation as a guy who gets things done. He's even learning to keep his Lycan side under control. Most. But when he's sent to Sin City on a simple retrieval job, things go sideways. He bumps up against a coven of unconventional witches, a psychic pawnbroker, and a mysterious enemy with a secret darker and more violent than his own. Take a bite out of the exciting second book in this gritty urban fantasy noir series. Please welcome author Wayne Turmel. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, us? You're speaking in the papal we there?
Is Steve not here?
I mean,
you are having us.
This okay.
This is a party.
I thought maybe
Thank you for being inclusive, Wayne.
Yes, that was.
I try, brother. I try. I swear I do. I have learned at my advanced age, it's not all about me.
Oh, stop! You're not that old. Unless you're going to tell me that dry air is doing it for you, that's for sure. So this is book 2. So we are well on our way towards that trilogy, huh?
Book 3 is under construction. Book 1, I was here a while ago telling you all about the wonder that was that. Absolutely. And this was basically written during the kind of COVID, first COVID 1.0.
How many books were written during COVID? It's unbelievable.
Really, COVID inspired a lot of new artists.
Not as many as people expected to. I think when the shutdown came, everybody was like, oh, I'm going to take this time and I'm going to be constructive and I'm going to finally write that novel because I have time. And as it turns out, existential dread is not as good for the creative juices as people thought it was going to be.
I mean, I get that, although I feel like every interview I do begins with, so we were locked down, so I thought I'd write a book. I mean, there's a lot of COVID books out there. It's like the Renaissance.
Well, but don't forget the first Renaissance novel was the Decameron, which was written during a plague.
Exactly. So there's like Renaissance and plague all mashed together here.
And that may be the only time Boccaccio and I are used in the same sentence at the same time. But I will take it.
So tell us about Johnny Lycan and the Vegas Berserker.
This is so much fun. My first 3 novels were historical fiction, and they were very kind of serious and whatever. And then I made this left turn into urban fantasy, and I'm just having so much fun. Johnny is a really fun character to write. It lets my silly side out a little bit, even though it's violent and scary and whatever. There's a lot of humor in it. And what's nice about this book, the first book is very Chicago, takes place in Chicago. And as somebody who moved from Chicago to Vegas, this was fun because I got to use my Chicago eyes to look at Las Vegas.
Nice.
And, you know, people either love this town or hate it. Turns out Johnny's not a fan. So
Isn't it fun when you discover things?
I get to write all the snarky stuff about Vegas that Midwesterners often think and most people don't say out loud. So it's actually a lot of fun.
I do love that. And Stephen, you were saying, isn't it fun when your character has his own like opinion and taste? And isn't that interesting?
But it's funny about that because I've gotten in trouble for things that Johnny has said or whatever. And I want to just put it at the beginning of the book, you know, the opinions of the characters are not necessarily those of the management.
Exactly.
That's
Right?
a very good disclaimer.
I personally would never use a certain word that Johnny might. He's 30, he's young, he's a blue collar Chicago kid. He may speak differently than the 60-year-old Canadian. You know?
Wait a minute, Canadian? Where are you from originally?
Originally a little town outside Vancouver. I know Portland very well, actually.
Oh, so you're all used to rain up there.
Yeah, that's why I live where there are 300 days of sun. This is a conscious choice. Even with my flammable Canadian skin, I prefer here.
Do you have a spare room? Because when Steve gets tired of being, you know, moist all the time, he might need to go someplace.
We have been known to serve as a stopping point for people.
Listen to that. Very good. Well, oh, goodness.
I'll keep that in mind, Wayne.
So from Canada to Chicago, well, that was like, you know, more of the same, just a little more snow.
There is not enough beer on the planet to tell the story of my journey. But you know, I left Canada. I was actually a professional stand-up comic for almost 20 years, which is what brought me to LA. And then I married my bride, and then we moved to Chicago, and now we're here. And, you know, all of that shows up in my work somehow.
And here you are writing urban fiction. Like, wow. How did the writing come about?
Well, I've written all my life. I mean, I started writing for my act, writing jokes, and then I tried to be a writer in Hollywood and had a couple of screenplays optioned, but nothing got made. And so I joined the real world, and I actually wrote several nonfiction books, and I've been writing my whole career for business. And then in 2014, I basically said, even though I've got all these books out and I've been published, and I'm never going to be a real writer until I do a novel. And I wrote my first novel, Count of the Sahara, and then hot on the heels of that were the Luca Lapou stories, Acra's Bastard and Acra's Orphans. And just when I started to get a little bit of a reputation for historical fiction, I said, no, let's blow it all up and tell this silly story about a werewolf detective.
Now,
you try living in this brain. You see what it's like.
Was it a dream? Was it too much beer? Was it a shadow in your backyard? Werewolves have always been my favorite horror trope, always. It goes back to when I was a kid. I remember distinctly, I was 13 babysitting my cousin, and Cairo TV out of Seattle used to show chiller horror theater, you know, with the fake vampire and the whatever, showing horror films. And I remember seeing Curse of the Werewolf with Oliver Reed, which was this old Hammer film. And you know, I think every 13-year-old thinks he has a scary rage monster inside of him trying to get out. And that's just kind of stuck with me. So werewolves were always my favorite. And this sounds corny, but I literally did have a dream one night about a fight between a werewolf and a gangster. And I woke up and went, oh, that was cool. And that was kind of the origins of Johnny. It was like, what if Jack Reacher was a werewolf? Wow, that's true. What if?
Do we know he's not?
He's big and hairy. He might be.
That's, you know, Hmm. Now
Just
you-
saying.
Just saying is right. Just saying. So you wrote the first book. This is the second. Is there more? What goes on next?
There's a third book, and so that will do the arc.
Oh yeah,
Um,
3-book arc that we all have to do.
yeah, so it's like if I walk away forever, it's not unsatisfying. With the 2 Luca books, I guess there could have been a third, but it didn't lend itself, and I wasn't getting much love. And the idea of spending a year and a half on a book that nobody was going to read didn't really appeal to me. And so I decided to change gears. I have lots of stories I want to tell. This is just the latest.
All right. So what's next on your hit parade then?
I'm not entirely sure. Actually, I have somebody who has interest in maybe doing Johnny Lycan and the Anubis disc as a movie. So I think the next thing is take a kick at the script.
Ooh, now
No guarantee it's going to happen, but that'll keep me off the street and out of trouble for a while. And then I've got another historical fiction kind of idea that's kicking around.
Now, in an ideal world, you have free reign to cast. Who are you casting in the movie?
Funny you should ask, because I play this game a lot. Johnny is hard to cast because he's 30 years old. And every time I have an actor in mind, it's now he's too old to play the role, right? There's a kid on the CW, he's on the Flash series, named John Core, who I think would be absolutely terrific. Mr. Core, if you are listening, I think he'd be great. The fun casting is there's a character who started in book 1 and she's in book 2 as well, Nurse Ball, who is an older woman that Johnny has a fairly wild fling with. And there's an actress named Yancey Butler, who I totally see Yancey Butler as Nurse Ball. That's been kind of my guiding star since I began.
Yeah, I get that, picturing people while you're going. What about you, Steve? Did you ever cast your book?
Not really so much during the writing itself, but once I got into interviews, I was a question like, "Wow, who do you see?" People want to get that visual image, and so I was like, "Who am I?" I eventually came up with a more mature Jim Carrey, but in his younger self, so not quite so goofball-y, but definitely not a straight character.
Gotcha. Yeah, well, that certainly from trying to understand your book and your characters without reading it, it's a common interview question, shall we say? Like, who are we talking about here? Just so I can picture it.
Yeah, I don't know that that's necessarily the right choice, but I don't know enough movie actors that would fit that. I mean, it's the closest I can come.
All right, so we're
The problem with casting Johnny is that he's very hairy, and they make all the actors in Hollywood manscape, so they all have bare chests. And that even spills over. If you look up shapeshifter and werewolf books on Amazon, they all use the same romance novel kind of hunky authors, and it's like they have to wax 27 days a month. It's so hard to find a picture of a guy who could be Johnny, because Johnny is he's 6 feet 6'1", 200 and something pounds. He's fuzzy.
So maybe you'll have to use plugs or like a chest toupee. Is that a thing?
A chest toupee.
Hey,
I would say chest merkin, but half the people would be horrified and the other half have to look up what a merkin is and then they'd be horrified. So I'm just going to say chest toupee will work nicely.
We'll just stick with chest toupee. I like that. Well, between the two of you, you've gotten quite a number of books under your belts. For all of those people out there who are still maybe just getting their positive COVID tests today, so they need to break out their pen and start writing their first COVID novel, how about some tips? Wayne, what would you say to a brand new writer? You're an accomplished writer at this point. What would you say to someone who's just holding that COVID test in their hand and popping out a pen?
The problem is that Okay, so on the surface, it appears that the COVID test would be the problem, because the first thing that I did when I started writing my first novel was I found writer and critique groups and started schmoozing with other writers and reading their work and getting feedback. And then I bring in the first couple of chapters and get some feedback on that. Now, when COVID hit, the writers group that I was with here in Las Vegas, we went virtual. And so we've been able to kind of keep it going to some degree, doing that virtually. But that, whether you're doing it virtually or in person or sitting on Zoom or sitting on the couch with a glass of wine, talking to Stephanie, talking to writers and getting that, not only that feedback, but hearing different people's work is really, really important. There's this notion that writing is very lonely and you go down the silo and you live in a garret by yourself for 6 months. and the truth of the matter is, I think writing for me is social. Typing is solitary. I mean, you got to be by yourself to bang out the words. But I think reading writing and talking about writing and having people recommend stuff and say, you know what, this is like this, you should read this, is incredibly powerful when you're first beginning.
All right. So Wayne's tip is COVID be darned. Make some friends, get in a group and get some of that good talent rubbing off on you.
Virtual friends are friends. I am not suggesting breaking quarantine and
Wayne, you and I are virtual friends, so yes.
Please, I have to write my book. I don't care if I'm typhoid Mary. No, that is not what I am saying.
No. Virtual friends are friends. I agree. I absolutely agree. How about you, Steve? What would you say to our new writers just fresh off of COVID?
Well, I would agree with some of what Wayne said for sure about having a support system, and that writing in to a degree, like other arts, is very social in nature. So, there's a context within that it exists, and you have to address that. Who are you writing for? And having that support system. I was lucky in that when I joined my first group on Facebook, I had someone who's a friend of a friend popped up, and I'm like, oh, who could that be? So I messaged them, and it turned out it was someone who worked with my aunt in Denver, who was a writer, and she had already written a dozen books. So I was like, oh, would you kind of just help guide me? And she said, yeah, absolutely. I actually have a writer's group. And so I was able to hop into something like that. I would say the other main thing, apart from obviously creating some good habits about your writing, whatever those are for you, because they're not the same for everyone. It doesn't necessarily mean writing every day, but definitely address that aspect of it. But more importantly, I think the why. If you don't really have a why about what you're writing for, either to serve yourself or to share a message, it's going to fall flat, because writing is tough. Writing is work as well. It takes a lot of work, and it takes a huge amount of work to actually execute something from start to finish professionally and get it out to the market and continue to do that. And it's no piece of cake. No. There's not a financial reward like that for most writers. So if you don't have a why driving you, it might not be the right use of your time. I'm just saying, examine that a little bit.
It's not important. Just the money. It's not just the money. It's the time. Somebody explained this once, and given my background, this made the most sense I ever heard. Writing a book is hard because it's like telling a joke and waiting 1.5 years for the laugh.
I like that. I like that.
It's like, here's my book. And then and maybe somebody reads it, and then they don't, and then they buy it, and then you hear from a total stranger 1 year later.
No, that is rough. You're absolutely rough. You're lucky if you hear from that total stranger. I always tell writers that I work with, optimistically speaking, because I'm an optimist, that somewhere your book is touching, changing a life, affecting them. But we just need to know that. We need to throw that out in the universe and just accept that it did make an impact, because you're never going to know. You're never going to get that phone call. Now,
I think for
Thank you
first-time
for-
writers, there are 3 moments that are the biggest. The first is, and you may or may not get this. I mean, if you self-publish, you kind of skip this step. But if your book is accepted to be published, or even when they say, yeah, we're going to do your book, that's number 1.
right.
Number 2 is the day that the books arrive, the proofs arrive in the box on your doorstep. That is the coolest thing ever. That's why people show videos of it on Twitter and they're crying and openly weeping. But you open that box, and I've written fiction and nonfiction now 15 books. When you open that box and that new book smell hits you, it's fabulous. And the third one is when you finally get a review that isn't somebody you know.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because when you put a book out, especially for independent authors, you put a book on Amazon and it's tell everybody you know, I got to get reviews, I got to get them as soon as possible. You know, as my circle of writer friends grows, you get more of those. But as you go through, you go, okay, I know that person, that person only gave me a 4, the hell with them. And you go down the list, and then all of a sudden you see a name you don't recognize. And it's like some complete stranger has gotten your book and liked it.
Yes. Awesome moment. You're so right.
Yeah, and those reviews are meaningful, not just for their presence, but the what they share for us helps us as writers.
Absolutely.
And helps other readers as well. And it's so important. I just wanted to encourage any readers watching this to please do review every book, books. It means so much to us, and we appreciate it. I read my reviews and I take them seriously, and even I thankfully haven't had but one bad review. But I take them all seriously, and I take them with a grain of salt, but I also look at any validity to them, and I want to improve as a writer, so they're meaningful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let me ask you too one more question. In this precipice of the holiday season that we're going to be on, whatever holidays you might be celebrating, could be Festivus for all I know, a lot of people are going to be doing a lot of shopping. So Steve, can you start and tell me who on my gift list, because I have a really long list, who on my gift list am I buying Greetings Planet Earth for? Can you describe the perfect person on my list?
Yeah, someone who's a fan of science fiction and humor. I would say that Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is a great kind of segment. Fans of, as I'd mentioned before, offbeat humor like Monty Python or Firesign Theater, but probably geared a little bit towards a more mature audience, although the character protagonist is in his early 20s.
Okay.
I'm in my late 50s, so it's written more towards a later generation with a few references to classics and things like that some readers who haven't been exposed to that might not get.
Okay, terrific. That pretty much describes who I'm shopping for. And how about you, Wayne? Who should I buy a copy of Johnny Lycan and the Vegas Berserker for?
Yeah, I think the Johnny Lycan series, the easiest analogy, this is lazy, but I'm essentially lazy, is if people read Jim Butcher, the Harry Dresden series, or Shane Silver, or any of those people who, the Suki, I'm blanking, the Charlene Harris series, where it's vampires, those types of readers who like a story that has fantastic elements, has detective elements, and some humor, although that's not the primary thing.
Okay.
When I was writing the first book, I actually laughed out loud in the opening scene because he's just had this violent, horrible fight, and he's a werewolf, and he reaches for the door, and how do you handle a doorknob when you've got 7-inch fingernails? And and hair. And so, you know, he just kicked somebody's butt, but he's frustrated by the doorknob. I think those types of things arise out of that. So people who enjoy that type of thing, if you are watching, you know, the Cabinet's Curiosity series on Netflix, you know, that kind of thing, and Dresden Files, certainly.
All
I
right.
just watched my first episode of that, so I would agree from the cover and what you said. I would throw out Resident Aliens and Guardians of the Galaxy as well for the on the movie TV side of things for my books.
Well, fantastic. I am ready to go shopping and I'm ready for the next in both of your series. So please promise you'll come back and share your next books and keep on writing. Thanks so much for sharing your books, sharing your tips, and inspiring a whole nother generation of COVID authors.
Thank you, Stephanie.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, lady. I really appreciate it.